Hello and welcome to another episode of the Biblical Story Series. I'm Pastor Anthony, pastor at Crossroads Community Church, and with Brendan as usual, and we're continuing through the topic of biblical prophecy. And we're going to talk about a topic which Brendan has written an article on, excellent article, which is linked to this video. So for more information, I encourage you to check that out. And this is in relation to the nation of Israel, the physical nation of Israel, and the ethnic religious people of Israel, the Jews, and their role in biblical prophecy. And it is vital, so we felt we should talk about this, write about it, and address it with you as our listeners or audience. And so I'm going to turn this over to Brendan with the first question. Why is the topic of the nation of Israel and its reestablishment so central to biblical prophecy and running through the Old and the New Testament very explicitly?
Yeah, it's a common thread throughout both testaments, as you said, and that, I think, shows the commitment and the graciousness and the love of God. I'm going to take us to one of my personal favorite Bible passages, and that is Genesis 12. This is a conversation between God and Abraham, who at the time was called Abram, and this is Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3. Let me read. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." Now, if you go on to read another passage I really like, Genesis 15, you'll see that all Abram really wanted was just an heir. He wanted a son, and he was getting more than he bargained for from God right here, telling him that a whole nation is going to spring up from him. But that is exactly what God says here, and this shows the covenant right now that God is establishing, the Abrahamic covenant, and that is God's promise to always be there for Israel, so that Israel will always be a light to the rest of the world, pointing to Christ, directing to Christ. So that is why God stayed with Israel through thick and thin in the Old Testament when they constantly rebelled, when they were constantly disobeying, when it would have been so much easier for him to just abandon them, which is quite frankly what they deserved, what we all deserve, but quite frankly what they deserved. And it's the reason why Israel is central to biblical prophecy after the fact when Jesus returns, is because God has promised to have his hand on this nation and to do his work and to be a light to the rest of the world through Israel. It is a nation that showcases his sovereignty and his glory, and that we trace that back to the 12th chapter of the book of Genesis.
Okay, back to Abraham. And in several of the prophets, God explicitly states that his covenant to be his God, they would be his people, he would be their God. It's an eternal covenant, and it was something that would never change. And so obviously the nation as a whole had rejected Jesus Christ. Many Jews, a remnant, followed Jesus, and in the early stages of following the Messiah, it was mainly a Jewish movement in the book of Acts. But by the time of 70 AD, when the temple is destroyed, it's no longer in any way reflective of being a Jewish people in relation to Jesus.
No, yeah.
It's largely a Gentile movement, at that time. Yet, even though they in large did not respond to the Messiah, Jesus came to his own, and his own people received him not, as it says in the Gospel of John, God still stays faithful to them. And that's what we see going on within end-time prophecy. Do I have a correct reading of this? Do you see this the same way?
I see that the same way. And furthermore, it demonstrates, it should be encouraging to us, because if God is staying faithful to this stubborn, stiff-necked people, then that means when we mess up, which we are also stubborn, stiff-necked people, he's going to be there for us as well, which is quite heartening because I mess up a lot.
Okay, yeah, it is. I mean, it shows God's faithfulness. And so, in Romans chapter 11, when it says that when the fullness of the Gentiles comes in, when the full number of Gentile people have come to Christ, then it says all of Israel. And Paul is talking about the nation of Israel will be saved. They will now, the God's end time plan will shift to the nation of Israel, as we see in the book of Revelation, Daniel, and other places, which is, we could go into so much about this. This is a really exciting topic. And so let's fast forward from 70 AD with the destruction of the temple, and then by 120 AD, the nation of Israel had been destroyed. There were no Jews in it or anything. So let's fast forward 1,900 years or thereabout, and we come to 1948.
Yes.
Tell us about the miracle that happened. Tell us about how you see that fulfilling Bible prophecy, and how this is before our viewing eyes as we look back through the video footage and the newspaper clips and everything else, a modern day miracle. Kind of elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, I mean, even to just rewind a little bit, the fact that Israel, which reestablished itself as a nation in 1948, the fact that they were able to do that despite them being, dispersed throughout the world after 70 AD when the Romans conquered them, that is a sociological miracle, on par with any of God's Old Testament miracles regarding Israel, like splitting the Red Sea or raining manna down from heaven, right? Because what usually happens, and we've seen this all throughout ancient history, is that when a culture or a society is conquered, after a few generations, their culture, their society is no longer intact. They assimilate, that's the word that's called. They assimilate into other cultures and adopt their beliefs and practices. And soon, their original culture is gone. It's lost to history. We see this time and time again. That's why most ancient cultures aren't around anymore.
Right.
But that's not the case with Israel. Israel retained its very unique identity with its very specific set of ideas and values and its God, despite being spread throughout the corners of the earth and not having a dedicated homeland. So the fact that they were able to retain that for so long and then come together as a people to an agreed upon area in 1948 to be reestablished as a nation, in and of itself, that is miraculous. But furthermore, the fact that they were able to fend off a wide swath of enemies who were not at all happy that they'd come back as a nation. I have here Lebanon, Iraq, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, which was called Transjordan at the time, and Pakistan internally. They were all set to destroy Israel. They were outnumbered. I don't know the exact ratio, but it was a lot. And Israel was able.
It's about 60 to 1.
60 to 1.
That's the ratio of the people when they reestablished themselves in 1948. I mean, it was a fight of 60 to 1. And they were also, they were an immigrant farming community. They did not have, the military installations and training and technology they have today.
No, and the fact that they were not only able to defend themselves, but win. They were able to fend off their enemies when they should have, by all rights, been obliterated. Yeah. They should have been obliterated. That is nothing less than the hand of God. That's him keeping his covenant, his promise to Abraham that we just read in Genesis 12. And furthermore, we see Israel today. They are thriving. They are thriving in a way that a country the size of New Jersey should not be thriving. They have a technological industry to rival Silicon Valley. Yep. They have agriculture. They are thriving. God's hand is with them.
So after, 50, 60, 70 years, to go from an agricultural community to being at the heart of technological, medical advancement that rivals Silicon Valley is staggering, and it's unbelievable. And bear in mind that in that 1,800 years between when they were dispersed, from the land of Palestine to 1948, they have been the most hated and persecuted
yes.
people on the face of the earth.
Without a doubt.
And that is, and why is that? I mean, I theorize why they've been so hated is because Satan wants them destroyed.
Yes.
If Satan could destroy the nation of Israel from being fulfilled, then he can destroy the movement of biblical prophecy and the return of Christ.
Because Israel's so central to it.
So, yeah, I mean, I believe, and I think that's why the Holocaust, what occurred right before the establishment of the nation of Israel. 6 million Jews
Satan
were killed,
inspired.
and a satanic Antichrist figure like Hitler sought to wipe the entire Jewish people off the face of the earth. That was his goal. Well, that was satanically inspired, and that's a whole another story. You and I could go on and on about the miraculous nature of this, but it's quite staggering to think about. So my follow-up question is how does this practically encourage us as believers, as we are followers of Jesus?
Well, I think quite simply it shows us that God, first of all, does not forget his promises. He does not fail in keeping them, even when we fail him time and time again. I don't know, if you're a biblical scholar or not, but Genesis 12 happened a long time ago. That was a long time ago. And the fact that he is still keeping that promise today, and furthermore, he still has a plan for Israel that is at the heart of the salvation story, that is at the heart of his plans to restore the brokenness of creation. The very fact that he is still staying faithful to Israel, I said this earlier, I'll say it again, it shows that he is going to be faithful to us today. It shows his deep love for us, no matter how far we stray from him, no matter how much we feel we've failed him. He is God and he is love, and he's going to be there for us. And that is deeply, deeply encouraging, even as we wade through the mess of the dysfunction of our own life, or as we try to grapple with a family conflict, or as we try to save our dwindling ministries. And no matter what we're dealing with, no matter what inadequacy we're feeling, God is going to stay faithful to us.
Right. I might just add to that, I guess this is so important to me, and I know this is your article and stuff. People are so concerned about the unfolding of events today. But if you look over at the nation of Israel, you can see we are right in God's timetable. Furthermore, there is no nation hated on the face of the earth that comes anywhere close to the nation of Israel. At the United Nations, they're a minority. All around the world, they are always centered out, as a problematic nation.
They're so tiny.
And even though really they're an incredible model of offering a diversity of human rights. They even have Arabs within their Knesset. People who oppose them are serving in their own, Knesset, their legislative body. But even with all the hatred, they still thrive and they advance and they move forward. And it shows us that if we are walking in God's plan in these days, we are aligned with him, we can thrive, we can advance, and we can move forward. So a lot of lessons. You and I could make this a much longer discussion, but for the sake of time and other things we need to do, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. But Brendan, thanks for the excellent article. Again, I encourage you to check it out and dive a little more deeply into this topic. Be encouraged. Also, just be encouraged that we are in God's timetable. He is sovereign, and a literal proof of that today is the establishment of the nation of Israel according to prophecy. So until next time, God's blessing, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Blessings. Thank you for joining Anthony and I today on the Biblical Story video series. Please subscribe to the Crossroads CCO YouTube channel, like, and share this video. Until next time.